welcome to Activate Worcester. Happy to see you. We're getting lots of interesting feedback from people about seeing the show, recommending it to others. And the positioning of it, which is what we wanted it to be, is that it should be something that transcends political parties. The objective for the show, as you know, is to get people active, get them involved, and a big part of that are the guests that we are fortunate enough to have, and tonight is no exception. And I've got my co-host, Mr. Pinto, who's been brought here once again at big expense, and Chris can introduce our fine guest for the evening, and we're glad to have you on board. Chris?
All right, so we've got an interesting guy here. He's not a local guy, but he is now. He's got a web property that many of you have probably heard of. It's called golocalworcester.com. He's educated in Rhode Island. He got his undergrad degree in journalism and history from URI, and he's a greenie too. He's got an environmental degree from Brown University as a graduate degree. First time I ever met this guy, I got a panicked call from a friend, said, Ed Augustus wrote this terrible article. It's full of lies about, show ID to vote. And you guys got to do something about this. You've got to counter this. And here's the guy's name, and call him up. He's got this new website. It just launched the other day. Go read the article and, get some people moving to give a response. So I gave this guy a call up. He had no idea who I was. I said, I'm Chris Pinto. I'm a local guy here. It's conservative. And did you have Ed Augustus write that article on purpose just to get us all fired up? I mean, was that your plan? Because we got a ton of guys that are fired up and want to write a response. And he didn't hang up on me. I was kind of excited, and he probably thought, who the heck is this guy? But he didn't. He welcomed me, and he said, oh, we'd love to have a response to that article. How do we get it? How soon can you guys write it? How soon can you get it? And, it's an interesting thing because what he's done to Worcester is change the landscape for print media, and online media. We can hold the Telegram accountable. We can bring stories to Go Local because they'll print them the way we set them. We can send them stuff and it's accurately portrayed, which is refreshing because we have a lot of reporters around here that will mince your words that seem to have an agenda of their own. And they'll take your quotes out of context and get you all upset. And we haven't experienced that all yet from Josh Fenton and the folks at Go Local. And we really appreciate your being here. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your background, because you got a little bit of political background yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. First, thanks so much for having us, and you guys have been a great partner since we launched Go Local Worcester in mid-February, and it's been just a great ride so far.
If we only didn't have jobs, we could do more of it.
Yeah, that's right. Well, my background is right out of college, I went to Washington and I worked for George Mitchell from Maine and John Chafee from Rhode Island. And two, it's a very different Congress nowadays. These were kind of moderate guys who worked the center of the aisle and helped bring people together. Mitchell got a little more partisan when he became majority leader. But in general, fairly moderate guys who looked out for their New England states pretty aggressively. And both of them very, very strong on issues like keeping manufacturing in New England, issues like, protecting the environment, big on foreign relations issues. Very, very interesting guys. And also, which is, I think, a real challenge right now, men of their word. When they gave their word, they either said yes or no on something, and they weren't, licking their finger and checking the wind.
Bill Clinton.
And seeing which TV network was going to play them best. It was different. And then I came back to Rhode Island, where I'd grown up, worked for 3 governors, a Republican, a Democrat, and a Republican. And then I was on the city council in Providence with Buddy Cianci, and I was kind of the young reformer, really interested in pushing issues of stopping pension abuse. Providence had 90% of their firefighters and police officers were going out on disability pensions. 66 2/3 tax-free, all soft tissue damage in their back. And it was the scam of the day.
There's a lot of that going around, I guess.
Yep, and raised that issue. And then got into communications, was partner in some major ad agencies. We actually, one of them I was a partner in. We had a major office up here in Worcester, over in the Bay State Bank building, RDW Group. And got to know Worcester exceptionally well and worked up here really for 2 years.
And you didn't run from that either.
Did not run for that. Saw this huge opportunity in business, and been very entrepreneurial of where in mid-sized markets, Central Mass, Providence, newspapers are functionally going away. They've dropped in circulation by 50, 60, 70%, depending on the market. In many cases, they're just no longer a viable business, and they're cutting back to 3 days a week printing. The Times-Picayune, a famous newspaper in New Orleans, just announced that they're going to 3 days a week. And really saw this opportunity to replace newspapers de facto in mid-sized markets. So we launched Providence a couple of years ago. It exploded. And
what were the parallels that you saw between the Providence market and the Worcester market?
Sure. The Providence market is actually a much more complicated media market because there's 3 TV networks that all have stations, and really a 4th with Fox. So a lot more crowded. It was a much more ambitious thing. When we looked at Worcester, and we looked at a bunch of cities, I liked Worcester, and I also like that it's kind of, down to earth, real people doing real things, is that there's no TV here. And, you can't...
Excuse me?
There's
Channel 13, baby.
We have some addicts already, I hear.
There is not a news product
Thank
on
you.
a daily basis like there is on local news. And I think local news, I'm outspoken about it, and I say it at conferences all the time. I don't think you're adding a lot of value to people's lives to talking about car crashes, house fires, and random shootings. There's a place to cover issues of public safety, and there's issues to cover relative to crime, and crime as we look across as accordingly to trends. How many murders are there in the city? But not the everyday one-off shot, somebody getting shot. So when we looked up here, we saw a place that's really underserved. And I'll tell you, we launched in February, and the first month we did 500,000 page views. And in Providence, when we launched, it was probably 6 or 7 or 8 months before we hit 500,000 page views. Yeah. And we had a lot more, local things. I think part of it is the very point you opened with, is, everybody's looking for an alternative. The other reality is people's behavior has just completely changed. You get your news from your smartphone. You're getting it constantly. You're getting it in line at Dunkin' Donuts. You're getting it first thing in the morning when you wake up. You're looking at it all day long. And the news cycle is like this. So I'll give you an example. We broke direct air, okay? Direct air closes down. It's a Monday night. We're talking to people on Twitter. We're getting it confirmed. We break it that night. The story explodes. Now think about this. It's a Monday night. The newspaper in town, they don't have it Tuesday. They have it Wednesday morning. We had 5 more stories up about direct air closing down in between before they hit ink on paper. So it's very, very difficult for a traditional print publication to compete with the speed in which we're moving.
Yep. And you've had some interesting political experiences yourself. You told me you're a big sports guy, and when you were down in D.C., you got some interesting comments about people you worked for. You care to share those stories?
Sure.
With us?
I played for a football team on the Hill called the Texas Six Pack. So this is 1987, and this was Army, Archer, Barton. These guys had just gotten in, kind of sweeping in on Reagan's coattails, and I worked for John Chafee. This John Chafee's a combat Marine in World War II, combat Marine in Korean War. There's books written about how brave he was in Korean War. Secretary of the Navy, 3-term governor, who's now a 2nd-term or 3rd-term U.S. senator. And these guys thought that John Chafee was literally a communist. I mean, not even a socialist. These guys thought he was a communist.
They've never been to Worcester, have they?
They have not. Yeah. And it was interesting. I will tell you something. When you're down in that environment, you're talking politics 24/7. And I said, who's the toughest debater on the floor? And it was interesting. Without a question, every single one of them said Barney Frank. Barney Frank was recognized as the guy you did not want to get into a throwdown debate on the floor.
He was intimidating, wasn't he? He walked in a room and he had the attitude that he was the smartest guy in the room, didn't he?
You know what? And to some degree, on certain issues, he probably was.
Yeah.
He was the most knowledgeable. He was the smartest.
Josh, I think one of the other issues with Barney Frank is that he pretty much uses something called the Talmudic approach to debate, which is basically elevate the heat,
Yeah.
get the other person really rattled, and then you got him.
Yeah, absolutely.
You never have a quiet conversation with a Barney Frank.
No, absolutely not.
And most people who he deals with at that level are comfortable in this kind of a situation. Not with a guy who's, jumping up and down, screaming.
Frothing at the mouth.
You
Yeah,
betcha.
absolutely.
And he disarms them that way.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's something that he's worked on for a lot of years.
Right.
And
He
Very,
likes
very
debating with dining room tables, I think he called the woman.
Yeah, that's right.
yeah,
right.
there you go.
He visualizes them as dining room tables, and then he takes them apart.
I think the other big learning experience was being a young reformer fighting with a mayor who ultimately, Buddy Cianci went to prison. And I'll tell you an interesting thing, and this is where I do see the difference between Providence and Worcester, is the structure of the government. Because you've got this, kind of part-time mayor, city manager, and so the power's really embodied in, a non-elected official.
Yeah.
That he's really graded, the city manager's really graded in Worcester on, is he good at balancing the budget? Is he good at contracts? Is he good at, and I don't know if he's good or bad on that, but let me just tell you, what doesn't happen is the big vision.
Yeah.
So the thing that Buddy Cianci was good about, we're going to undo the rivers, and we're going to build this, and we're going to build them all,
yeah.
and da-da-da-da-da.
In Worcester, I don't think it's the manager that's the problem. Last night at City Council, they had a report explaining how there are $666 million that they are going to owe for current retirees and future retirees for health care.
Right.
Do you know what the City Council did with it?
Put it in the bottom drawer and
They
moved on to
filed
the
it,
next
yeah.
item. Yeah, absolutely.
They filed it. So, how does a guy like Mike O'Brien be successful with City Council that would rather talk about panhandlers
Right.
than a looming crisis?
Listen, most people don't want to take on the big third rail type of issues. Those are pension reform, health care reform. In the city of Worcester, you add up the pension cost unfunded liability and the health care cost unfunded liability. And you're talking about $1 billion in unfunded combined liability that bill comes due at some point. And so if you're kind of pushing, as Mitt Romney would say, kicking that down the can, kicking that can down the road, simultaneously, you're not coming up with bigger plays that help bring in a stronger tax base and really get the city hot. This is the second largest city in New England, and it has a lot of assets. I know the market pretty well, know the city pretty well. It has a lot of things that other cities don't have. Give me an example. Providence doesn't have the museums that Worcester has. Worcester has incredible museums up here. We have functionally one museum in the city of Providence, and it's owned by Rhode Island School of Design. And there's, 5, 6, 7, depending on how you want to count it, 10 great museums up here that bring a lot of folks from a lot of distances in here. But they come in, they go to the museum, and they drive away. Nothing's really connected
There's
in the
no
city.
synergy.
There's no synergy.
No.
Yeah.
And, you've got Hanover at one end. Our offices are down in Mechanics Hall. And it's almost, non-existent what takes place in between. And, you redo a couple of these beautiful historic buildings, you get a game-changing play in the city of Worcester.
Yep. So you've been here since February.
Well, we've been here since February.
And you've got some interesting stories you've written about, and you've got
absolutely.
some interesting contributors.
Yeah.
Who's, you sort of have this open door policy. You've got,
We do.
The conservatives that find time working
Right,
to
right.
contribute once in a while. You've got reporters that pretty much play it straight.
Yeah.
And then you've got people from the left side of the aisle as well. So.
Yeah, and I think moderates, we've got what we call mind-setters, which are opinion writers,
Yep.
op-ed writers in a traditional newspaper. And they range from Grace Ross, who's a very progressive, to Tom Finneran, the former speaker, who's actually a pretty conservative guy. I mean, I didn't know him particularly well prior to launching.
Nationally, I think he is. I don't know if he's so conservative when it comes to Massachusetts.
You know, if you read the body of pieces that he has written since to date, I'll tell you what, it is almost Tea Party-esque in the things he's been.
Yeah, but maybe he has a little more levity and leverage in doing that sort of thing now that he's out of office.
Yeah, absolutely. And boy, everybody when they get out of office, I can tell you from working for a couple senators, they would quietly say late at night, I can't wait until I'm in my last 2 years so I can let loose. And, watch a senator, especially a senator because they've got the 6-year terms, when they've made their announcement that they're not running again, and watch all the issues that they punch people in the nose about in their last 2 years and they let loose about. So I think that's interesting. I think Worcester benefits greatly from having really a conservative movement that has sparked in the last really 4 to 6 years publicly. It's been a very, whether you call it a Tea Party or it's a more conservative Republican structure, it has changed the dynamics up here immensely and created really for the first time in a really machine-oriented town a debate on a lot of issues. And listen, from my viewpoint, anytime you're debating issues of public policy, it always comes out better.
Sure.
Yep.
Well, 2 things, Josh. Number one, you hear the term conservative, which tends to polarize people very, very quickly.
Right.
Or progressive or liberal on the other side. The reality is what the people who are quote-unquote Tea Party people, what they're really looking at are 2 things. They're looking at smaller government.
Right.
And they're also looking at fiscal sanity, not fiscal conservatism, okay? Fiscal sanity. And the premise being that if you ran your home the way most governments are running, you wouldn't be in that home very, very long. And that's the issue. And I think that's...
Or you'd be getting bailed out of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, maybe. And I think that's a big reason that you've seen this movement. And I think it's been, to some degree, it's been a reaction against the status quo. And going back to this show, Activate Worcester, we're not trying to activate people on the right or the left. We're trying to activate people, get them involved, have interesting guests like yourself who can make them think and get involved with things that are happening in our community that they could have some impact on. The Go Local that you put together, okay, this is what it looks like when I print it out. Typically, there are 3 lead topics every single morning, okay? At least 2 of them I find extremely interesting, and you generally don't see anything about this in the quote-unquote mainstream media. For example, this morning, one that I just happen to have here, the headline is, "Buying a home is 52% cheaper than renting in Worcester," and it's backed up with lots and lots of detail.
Absolutely.
And you see things here that the gray lady of Commercial Street doesn't touch for whatever reason. This isn't really a third-rail issue,
right,
but this is a newsworthy issue. Why do you guys dig it up and these folks don't go there?
Well, I think part of it is we are an incredibly aggressive company. I mean, just the type of people we're trying to hire and the pace in which we're working. And we are, pretty much on a close to a 24-hour news cycle on almost every given day. And we work incredibly hard at it. We want to add value to people's lives. So whether it's breaking down, I'll give you an example. We broke down who at Bain gave money to Brown and Warren. And it was an interesting story. Who would have thunk that both of them got a ton of money? And, you're going to see, we've broken a number of stories about the Brown-Warren race that didn't just get picked up in Central Mass. They got picked up by Huffington Post, Politico, AP. I mean, we've probably broken as many national stories on that, certainly more than anybody else in Central Mass. But it's not just on politics. We broke the story on this young guy, went to St. John's Prep. He was the head of player personnel for the Oklahoma Thunder. We break a big story about him. 2 weeks later, he becomes the general manager for the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic sent out a press release announcing him. They list one press entity in the entire article with a quote from, and it was Go Local Worcester, so go figure.
Go figure, right? Go local. The other thing, in terms of your reporting on politically oriented issues, good one that I saw on Monday that I printed out because I liked it, three-way state rep, the race heats up.
Right.
And what I liked about it is that 2 or 3 paragraphs about each of the 3 candidates, very succinct, and it didn't have a real strong political bent to it, if you will.
Listen, if you can find, and we say it all the time, and we've got a pretty significant track record, if you can find that we're biased one way or the other, let me know, because I don't know about it. And I'll also tell you this. I've been called up, so the email blast, we start the day off every day in both markets with an email blast. In Providence, it goes out to 40,000 people. In Worcester, it goes out to over 20,000 people. It's a big distribution. And invariably, when that email blast goes out, I get an angry phone call from, I've gotten it from mayors, I've gotten it from chiefs of staffs, I've gotten it from congressmen, I've gotten it from Senate candidates, senior staff, and they're mad about something. And sometimes I've seen the article that they're yelling at us for, and sometimes I haven't. And, you know, and I always take it down, just like, you know, our first interaction. What's the issue? Are we being fair to you? Did we make a mistake? And in most times it's, I don't like the headline or something like that.
But they don't challenge you on your facts.
We have not had a significant factual. And listen, we've broken big stories. I mean, the police chief of Providence is no longer the police chief of Providence because of reporting we did. The head of the Providence Housing Authority is no longer the head of the Providence Housing Authority. I think our reporting on, and you know, I'll say it, on the T&G leaving their building contaminated. And here's how I started the discussion. You think about this. I always started it by saying a company from New York, publicly traded, came up to Central Mass and they bought a local company. Over the course of the years that they own it, they laid off half the staff, they closed the manufacturing, and then they left the building and left it contaminated. And people go, that sounds like a
Bank Capital.
Yeah, that's Mitt Romney. And I go, guess what company it is? And they say, who is it? And I say, it's the New York Times.
Yeah.
They bought the T&G. They've laid off half the workforce. They've outsourced the manufacturing to another company, to the Boston Globe, and they left the building with $1 million contamination. And if it was anybody else, everybody would be
all over it.
Oh my God!
And rightfully so.
Absolutely. And so, you know, there are no sacred cows. We're going to tell the stories. And, you know, you've called us on stories and asked us to look into things, and we look into it pretty quick and pretty aggressively.
Yep.
Kind of thing.
And when there's nothing there, you come back and say, I don't think there's anything there.
Absolutely. We're not salacious. You know, we're not going to do the piece. We kind of have a golden rule. The person's kids ought to be able to go to school the next day. That's just kind of the mental test we have. So it doesn't need to be personal about somebody. It doesn't need to be about their family or those types of things. Just stick with the facts and do fair reporting, and those things sort of take care of itself. You know, a state representative just retired, and he had a pile of cash in his campaign fund, and he used the funds in lots of interesting ways, and nobody had reported on it. And it wasn't a little bit of money. It was tens of thousands of dollars that he used for entertainment, for purchases of computer equipment, things like that. You know, we're not the arbiter of
gifts for constituents.
Gifts
makes you wish you were a constituent.
Lots of interesting expenditures within those dollar amounts. The other thing we do that's very interactive is we leverage social media tremendously, and we also try and create an atmosphere in which the reader, the user, the video watcher has an opportunity to comment on it, whether it's on our site or on Facebook, or can tweet about it, because they have the same opportunity to be able to do it. And when they talk to us about a story, then we want to hear it as well.
So it's very interactive.
Without a doubt.
Where do you go from this point? Do you expand to another city? What's next for Go Local?
Sure. As a company, you know, we've been very blessed in being able to attract significant advertisers in the market. So, you know, whether it's Bay State Bank or St. Vincent or, you know, any of the number of really strong local brands have joined us. So that's created some opportunities. As a company, Merrill Brown, who's the founder of MSNBC and Court TV, just joined our board. And that's a big win for us. You know, that's a guy who understands media at the highest level, and he saw what we were doing, and he said, listen, there's no digital media company that is both doing real journalism and monetizing their websites, you know, doing anywhere other than you guys. And so we think we've got parts of the model correct. You know, it's a long haul, and there's a lot of competitors out there, but we like it. We really like this market. We think there's a lot of opportunities to grow. You know, August we did 1,100,000 page views. You know, probably makes us the second largest, most visited digital site. And listen, it's all going digital. You got 79% of affluent Americans now have a smartphone. You're going to see penetration across all demographics to really 75, 80% everybody. And that's really where they're going to get their information. We're launching a huge new mobile platform that'll be going live in the next couple of weeks, and you'll have video online, you'll have slideshows online. We think it's a big game changer and creates the opportunity to check Go Local 3-4 times during the day.
All of which will make it increasingly difficult for the traditional print media to compete.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to put anybody out of business. I think there is a place in which traditional print, I think community newspapers will continue.
Without a doubt.
You know, I love my community newspaper. When my kids were in junior high, that was the place where you got the picture of them getting on the,
absolutely.
You know,
as long as they remain topical,
absolutely,
they'll continue. That'll be their niche.
I do think daily newspapers are in for a tough, and these paywalls that they're putting up is crazy.
Absurd.
Because 3 times you hit a paywall, you're never going back to that website again.
Josh, just to kind of wrap it up a bit, what would you like the viewer to do relative to Go Local? For example, people who are hearing about this for the first time, how do they tie into this? How do they become members? Because it's free, folks, and believe me, it's great. But
sure, a couple things. First of all, visit the site. You can sign up in the top right corner to get the daily email blast. Just register for the site. And then
the site is?
GoLocalWorcester.com.
Thank you.
And second of all, if you're using social media, follow us on social media, and that's a great opportunity to stay current on it.
Great.
Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope to see many more interesting stories come out of your paper, and we hope you're enjoying your time here in Worcester.
Absolutely. It's been absolutely great. Thank you so much for having us.
Pleasure to have you.
Thanks.
As I open the show, I've told you, literally going back to the genesis of this program, our shows are predicated on the strength of our guests. And as long as we can have people like the Josh Fentons of the world, our job is a piece of cake.
That's right.
Keep watching. I think you'll continue to enjoy us. And pass the word. And more importantly, get active in Worcester. It's your city.